Yo, greetings. I am Lies and I use she, her.
And I am Scandal and I use they, them.
And let's play a game together.
Yeah.
Alrighty, here we go.
Here we go.
Their bodies are burnt, not even afforded a proper funeral, because there were too many of them. I told Lucio, clean water, clean living. If we'd provided for the people, they could have survived it. Those are important things, but I don't know what that means by your standards.
I don't know that either.
But he did not listen, and I failed to convince him. And with every family destroyed, I failed Vesuvia even more. Okay, not to interject too soon, but I was like, did you have no power at all when he was alive? I failed to convince him. But could you not do anything without him?
I was about to say, did you have then, no political power as being basically a royal on your own, right? Were you literally, quite literally just so much a figurehead? Also, I was actually going to say she actually contradicts herself here. She says, I did not do anything. So apparently to her not doing anything was that I wasn't successful. There is do or do not do. There is no try, basically, for Nadia'a, which is actually really harsh and really cruel to yourself, because you're like, I did try. Even, putting aside did she have actually power to do anything at all, it was she did try, and I mean, actually command people, but, she did actually try to basically interact with the people that she saw as authorities, I guess, and going, you are the ones who can do something. So, to me, it sounds like she did, quote, do something.
Yeah,
it just wasn't successful, which is very different.
Right.
That was a conversation I remember hearing that you had at one point where somebody was like, I suggested this thing over and over again. And this one person
listen.
You're not listening to me. And the response was, what I'm hearing is that you're saying that she should do these things. But the thing is that she has heard you and she's choosing not to, and that's what's pissing you off. Yes. It's not that you're just making suggestions and whatever, you're just not allowing someone to have their process, basically.
Right. Well, it was very much, she is not listening, and they're going actually, she's just choosing something else. She is listening. But in this case, I was like, this particular case rather than my own, though that conversation was funny and frustrating and stupid, but also empowering that one of my friends supported me in that way, and I was like, yes, thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you, at long last.
I feel like, Nadia'a definitely did do something, putting in the effort in the direction if she was in a space where he had disempowered her, he, in the way that is classic for abusive men, had gaslighted and controlled and disempowered, her to a point where she, regardless of her actual political status, which we don't know what was, felt as though she couldn't do anything without his approval. She went to him and tried desperately to make him do the thing she would do.
So, what I, again, find to be really interesting, and my brain cannot understand how to mesh them together, I am still blown away by the way that Nadia'a describes, basically her abuser, which is Lucio in this case, is that the way that he is described, and when he's not on screen, he is so much more of, a force, a presence, and etc., right? It's sort of I don't know how to talk about it, but it kind of reminds me a little bit of Birds of Prey. Okay. Do you remember the main villain in there where he's an awful, goddamn, childish, horrific person?
Right.
But the thing was also, again, he was a man-child.
Right.
Basically. And, I remember, so apparently around when Birds of Prey came out, because my friend and I finally watched that recently, and I was like, oh my god! But the fact that also he was that much of a man-child made him more terrifying. Kind of thing, because he was so unpredictably selfish and savage. And not to say that children are those things, because that is a societal expectation, and that's not how I believe that children are naturally at all, kind of thing. But it was interesting because a lot of people, and especially men, as far as I understand, actually really hated that character choice, because they were like, he's pathetic, he's simpering, he's whatever it is, and it's if you've ever been in an abusive relationship, that is what it is. And I don't know how to, I keep going, I kind of actually, more that we've been playing that, and now I have that in my head, I'm kind of I wonder if that's what basically Lucio's supposed to be. Is that sort of all-powerful man-tyrant child who, at the flick of a hat, and has somehow impossible power, as it were, for some reason, physical ability, a lot of backing.
So, okay.
But because the thing is I keep going, because what I get confused by is when we do see him, I'm like, what kind of threat is he?
He just seems whiny.
He just seems whiny, and I don't know what to do with that.
So I would say from someone who's been in an abusive relationship with a manipulative individual who has been described on occasion as someone who has narcissistic personality disorder, I would tend to say that, and having talked to other women, also having been in similar situations, because, you find each other when you have that in common. It sort of happens. There is this experience where it is generally men who have a large blanket amount of generic social privilege. They are white, they are moderate to conventionally attractive, they are healthy and able-bodied, and they are, good with words, and they are direct and a force. I would say, as well as, they're averaged tall height. I say, so they get all these things working for them of, those are the standard privileges of you walk into a room and people go, oh, you're supposed to be here.
Right, exactly.
And then after that, they get to levy any amount of personality against that privilege.
Right.
And so those are the kinds of people that end up being in charge. And if we're saying we have similar kinds of biases in this world where there's so much ethnic representation and very little white people, if you will.
Right.
And Lucio is supposed to be that archetype. Does he possess, also if this is more of a post-gender society, I'll say loosely, does he possess white male privilege, and is that why he's so powerful?
I mean,
and
part of me wants to say, he has literal magical white male privilege. As based on everything I can tell, he does. The reinforcement of the plot, the way that his background is so vague in regards to what his powers that he got, the deals that he made with the other demons were, it's so vague. It does, inadvertently, it sounds a little bit like a white supremacy sort of, basically, background for him. He's going, I'm an authority, I deserve all these things, of course I do. And then you have all these other people trying to navigate around this person who's the world revolves around me.
And the thing is if you have those social privileges and world revolves around me, people tend to bend to it. They tend to go, well, yeah, because that's what I've been trained to. So when my ex would walk into a room being a tall, moderate, attractive person who was clearly able-bodied and confident kind of thing, and well-dressed and well-spoken, everybody would be like, yes, that's the kind of guy you listen to because I've been trained my whole life to do so.
Right.
And especially since he was 6'3".
Yeah.
And so there is a height thing as well. Now, there's definitely a median height of privilege where if you get too tall, you lose it.
Right.
I was going to say, but he was right in there. The 6 foot to 6'3" is that window.
Right.
Some people in 6'3", depending on their build, they're that's a little too tall.
Right.
But yeah, it's and it's I think even your 5'11" and to 6'2" is your ideal window for height respect for men in America.
Right.
But that's been my exposure. It's probably different regionally. And so I'm just it's really weird. On the other hand, when I describe him as competent, intelligent, creative, perceptive, but I also describe him as an inexperienced, whiny, entitled baby asshole. And he is simultaneously all of these things. And the thing is he can be really stupid about some things, but it's basically in reference to what I perceive to be social anxiety of, I don't know if my privilege works here. And so in the way that I've gotten to know him, because I was with him for quite a while, I would tend to say that he's very much in that realm of his privilege equals being smart. So smart is a magical thing that people have.
Right.
Where you can't earn it, you can't control it, you can't improve it.
You can't. Now, it's not a skill you work on.
It's just a gift, like a blood privilege you have or you don't.
Yes.
I'm not saying this is true, but I'm saying that's how it's treated socially.
Right.
But being a hard worker who learns and understands things well, that's something you can control.
Yes.
So his privilege is something that he's often sort of running into going, well, does it work here? Does it work here? And so there's a level of incredible insecurity around it. And I've seen this in other men as well, having been with him so long and going, this applies seemingly to a lot of American white men, of going, I know I have this thing, but since it is basically a magical, immaterial gift that I can never basically change, I don't know if it will work here or not. Sort of like when you're the smart kid and you look at an answer, you either know or you don't.
You know what it also reminds me of? It reminds me of the Commander in the Shape of Water.
Yes. And there really was this thing of going, I'm working really hard to maintain this, but I also assume I have it because it is just sort of generically mine,
Mm-hmm.
but I also am trying to fit in the archetype because I have it,
Mm-hmm.
but then also I'm never good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that character was really, really interesting. I don't know if you've seen The Shape of Water, anyone watching this, but it's a complex movie by Guillermo del Toro.
Uh-huh.
It has, I don't know if I'd qualify it as horror, but it has some real graphic scenes in it, just
Yes.
so warnings. I would just say, and it can be dark at places, but overall, it's kind of a neat love story.
Yes.
I'll say, and without doing too many spoilers, and the what would be characterized as the main bad guy due to traditional plots
Right.
is a fascinating, complex character.
Yes.
He's an awful, awful person,
But
he's real interesting.
right, and I mean, just to swing it back around, like, that's basically, though, so you now understand, like, you do get basically what I keep thinking of, going, what I keep expecting
And what I
from
keep
Lucio
expecting from Lucio
is
to see him sort of, instead of show up and go, everybody love me, to go up and go, I'm here.
Right.
And I expect respect.
Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
And also going, again, he could be like, hey, I'm here, but also that he has that ability to lash out, and no one will challenge him.
And that weird thing of,
But
like,
that's
sort
also
of,
then what's weird to try to counter it with Nadia'a of going, again, like both of us went, why doesn't Nadia'a just call the guards?
well, and him showing up and whining at Nadia'a feels really weird.
Yes, it does.
It's not something I'm used to. I'm used to more abusive men the way she's describing him, and I'm specifically going to go the way she's describing him.
Right.
Being more like, I'm going to subtly attack you. I'm
Yes.
going to backhandedly undermine you. I'm going to be like, oh, it's so good to see you. Looks like, you've had some trouble while I've been gone.
Uh-huh.
And, wow,
Start to
let me,
nitpick, drag her down.
let me
so-
just gently nag things about you. And I'm
Yeah.
not skilled at it, so that was probably a poor example. But those types of things. Or of going, oh, you're wearing your hair down these
So,
days. That's a choice.
The thing is also why I'm struggling with this, you guys, and we've talked about this before, is that I, as a reader and as a person who likes to consume media, I really hate the trope where people go, they say all this shit about this person, and then when they show up,
never
they
see
don't
it.
illustrate any of that, which I feel like I keep seeing with Lucio over and over again. It happened in Julian's route, and I was like, why should we be afraid? He feels like a joke villain. And then they were like, now the real big bad suddenly then turned into the devil, which was a
What
strange choice.
Hang on.
What?
What if he is a joke villain? What if that's the point? That the whole rest of the game is essentially serious, except for you get a bunch of interjections of comedy, because they're really here, and we've noticed them all over the place.
Yeah.
And he's supposed to be like a joke character.
Yeah, but then other people's trauma, I feel like, is minimalized and also trivialized in that way, and I don't like it.
And I
because
can see-
everybody has all of this trauma surrounding basically Lucio. And you'll excuse me if we're using probably more inflammatory language. I'm trying to express basically what I think is the severity they're trying to go for. And it sort of hurts being like, I have been around, like, I had a shitty relationship with someone who manipulated me and hurt me a lot. Not necessarily in the same kind of way.
Well, and
but
Nadia's
it's just like,
not describing him as frustrating and difficult and whiny. She's describing him as an abuser.
Yeah.
So the strong language is already there. Anyway, so that's kind of beaten into the dirt. Thank you for joining us for that.
anyway.
I failed Vesuvia even more. My entire marriage was a failure. Every time I failed to stop Lucio, I failed the city.
But if basically, okay, so part of the reason why I also find this to be interesting is going, like, as far as I'm hearing over and over again, is that men have supreme power for reasons. Which is, again, really interesting, because based off of almost everything that I've seen about this game...
You have an empress.
You have an empress, and there seems like there's a lot of implied... It doesn't mean that it's like, it comes to fruition much, it seems.
Matriarchy?
But there's a lot of implied matriarchal stuff going on. And because they're trying to be subversive, but I don't feel like it's executed well, because then your biggest point is all about basically, so you have a masculine-coded devil character, because I would totally call that goat masculine-coded, absolutely based on design and color choice and language. Lucio is definitely a man, and he identifies as such. There's, it's interesting, and I'm kind of like, is a lot of this, is this about like a war between, quote, you'll have to excuse me, like the feminine versus the masculine? But again, it feels like a weird extension, because I'm going like, but your society is one, post-gender, and so two...
Except for in here, it doesn't say they're post-gender, that's Twitter canon.
No, and I know that's Twitter canon, but it's one of those things of like trying to incorporate that idea. Does that sound like...
I'll say, what I'm going to go here is being like, when she says my entire marriage was a failure, it feels like this bit of exposition right here should be some sort of a payoff to previous build-up.
Right.
It feels like Lucio appearing and behaving the way he is should be a payoff to the previous setup of the story, because she's talked about him a lot. And yet, I don't know what the goal of her marriage was. And so I don't know why her marriage would be a failure, so this means very little to me.
Yes.
Now, I know it clearly hurts her, and her feeling like a failure to the city I'm sympathetic to.
Right.
But I don't have connection to the part of the story where my marriage was a failure, and every time I failed to stop Lucio and going, was the goal of your marriage to stop Lucio? And before you were married, you couldn't stop Lucio? But after you were married, you assumed you'd be able to?
Is this one of those, I saw him, and I went, ooh, I can fix him. But I'm also like, where in the world would you get that sort of attitude with Nadia'a, other than Nadia'a was rebelling so hard?
Well,
so we've talked about this before, of trying to figure out, like, what her motivation is.
Here's a question I would have then. If, as this implies based on my lack of other information, her motivation to marry him was to stop him from doing bad things and to help him or make him do good things, what was giving him the power to do those big bad things? Again, was he the count here over this entire city, and she married him to try and improve the city and change his behavior before she arrived? Like, did she meet him and go, oh, the Count of Vesuvia is being shipped to part of my mother's kingdom, but he seems salvageable. Sorry, empire. My mother's empire. But he seems salvageable. Right. I think I'd like to take on that project.
Right.
Also, you know,
it'll get me away from my family, probably, too.
Right.
Like, if I can run away to basically the far reaches of my family's...
Of the empire.
The far reaches of my empire's, realm.
All right.
Okay, sorry.
Failed the city. The plague. That was just a final failure. One with horrifying consequences.
Hang on. So it was like, Lucio would have never listened. You tried to do it alone.
Wait, what?
Okay, so part of the thing is going to be like, that was the final failure? And I'm like, but you said you kept trying and kept telling him, going clean living, all these things. The plague was going on. I was trying to save families. So over and over. That was the final nail in the coffin, but you mentioned all those other nails. How is that the only nail the final nail in the coffin?
Well, because he couldn't do anything more bad after that because he died. So it's the final nail because that's when it ended.
All right, fine. I'm a little nitpicky about that because I was like, you just described all these other failures that were, like, contributed to.
I think she's just talking, like, sequentially. That was the last bit.
Yeah, but the plague took a while.
Yeah, but again, he couldn't do anything else bad.
Because then he died.
Well, because he died. And no other big events happened to punctuate anything.
Right. Lucio would have never listened. You tried to do it alone.
I mean, we don't know if she tried to do it alone. That would be a statement of assuming. Yes. You tried to do it alone, because she's saying, I didn't try and do it alone, I tried to make him do it. That's what she said.
But also, Lucio would have never listened. We also don't know that either. That's also making an assumption of character? We
can assume, based on what she's told us so far, from everything she's said, that he would have never listened. And also, we've met him briefly now, and going, yeah, he would never listen.
But part of the thing is that I feel like going with, you tried to do it alone, because that has just been Nadia'a. Nadia'a is Julian. Like, she has exactly the same damn problem of him going, I've tried everything! You've tried doing all this shit alone with no other ideas, and you are stunned every single time when we bring up literally anything. Have you ever actually tried going to the bathroom? Oh my god! You know, it's like...
Now, here's the thing is, that just disregarding any amount of effect this might have on the story.
No, I don't.
Just thinking about what's here. First of all, neither of these make sense to me.
No, they don't.
In reference to what she just said. They're just both assertions of a thing.
Yep.
And neither of them are both, here, let me, like, talk into what you were saying. They're just, let me describe part of your situation. At least that's the way they feel to me. But she literally described not trying to do it alone, specifically only trying to convince him and nothing else, and feeling powerless because she couldn't convince him. So she literally, in this one case, did not do it alone. So the other answer feels like the only answer in this case, not because it feels good, but because, based on what she just said, it is one of the very few things that she absolutely did not try to do alone. She tried to make someone else do alone.
So as far as I can tell, what they're trying to imply here is that Nadia'a tried to talk to Lucio by herself.
Oh.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I quite literally, that is what they've said almost every single time. You pushed out your sisters, you wouldn't ask for the help, you didn't understand they were there for you. Like, it is all about...
Okay.
Like, that is my...
So, Lucio would never have listened is more like, even if you brought more people in, he would never have listened.
Yes.
And the other one is, it didn't work out because you really didn't ever bring anyone else in.
Yes.
And there were times in my big relationship, the one I is basically the only one I reference on this channel.
Yeah.
I'll say, is like, I was like, if we had other minds here, other ideas, other thoughts, other, basically solutions other than just our two brains alone in a void can come up with, perhaps this will get better. And that was especially, that was way before I ever realized any of it was abusive at all. And I went on for years where I was just like, I'm really bad at this really bit like long-term relationship thing. Geez, you know? And so I would tend, like, if that's what that means, you tried to do it alone, it'd be like, I'd be all for that going, Nadia'a. That follows the plot so far, if that's what that means.
Okay, so the reason, again, like I said, my assumption is literally because everything has built off of that previously. I'm like, we're still having this argument even this far into the game, basically.
That makes sense.
So, and again, I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, because sometimes what you can do is you can be like, here's literally this one thing, and let's attack it basically from different angles. We're just kind of asserting over and over again from other angles going, yeah, we're still having the same conversation, but just, you know, with some of the words changed, because people can be more difficult to basically interact with than just a, hi, I'll have one conversation with you, and then the way as all stories go, I will suddenly be transformed, and it will never come up ever again.
Right. Okay. So you try to do it alone, like I said, in that context, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, so to me, I would go with, you tried to do it alone.
Do it.
Okay. You tried to do it alone.
How else would I do it? That sounds so her. She's like, yes, there is only me. Was I supposed to ask Lucio to pretty please work with me? He didn't want to. Wait a second. That suggests of going, I was fixing this or trying to when he wouldn't do it. Was I supposed to go, no, work with me? Which doesn't sound like what you were doing at all. You sounded like you were trying to get him to do it instead of you. And so I was kind of afraid that this was that, but maybe
it might not be a bad thing. It's just
maybe this means
it could be her just being defensive. Well, he wouldn't listen to me. Okay,
and you're going, that's not what I said.
Yes,
that's not what I said. He was useless as a partner. Yeah, I assume you wanted him as a partner for something at some point,
right? Why did you even get with him to begin with? I didn't mean Lucio. You had other people you could rely on.
Well done. She did misunderstand. And you got it. Yes. Excellent.
I'm like, so I kind of read some of this correctly, but
you're catching
But
on.
I'm also just like, in regards to character, it makes sense. We keep stumbling, I'm not even kidding you guys, I swear to God, I'm like, we keep stumbling over the same point over and over again, even where I'm like, okay, I feel like we've dug it into the dirt a little bit. And I actually kind of was like, okay, I'm okay with us talking about it for a while. And then it was like, we're still having this conversation?
Only point of Nadia's entire story is that she cannot figure out that she's allowed to and able to have help.
Yes.
Which in some ways I relate to, because I tend to do things by myself and I tend to not realize when I need help. Even when I'm getting stressed out and overwhelmed, I don't realize for most of my life that that's a time to ask for help. And through therapy, I have realized that's because a lot of times I wasn't ever given help when I asked for it. So in my brain, I finally just turned off the switch of, you're not allowed to have this. Sort of like a young child who's expected to solve their own tantrums and crying fits of going, well, they'll just take care of it themselves. They need to learn to self-soothe. What I learned from self-soothing as a child and as a young person was, there is no one for me to rely on. I cannot have help.
Yeah.
And to a point of going, I don't go, oh, no one will help me. It's just ingrained of, I'm doing this. And I need to keep doing this. And you don't even realize that help is an option at all.
So, and again, I want to stress this before we move on real quick. Okay, so I don't mean that this necessarily makes it a bad story for this point to be brought up over and over again. It is basically a convention of writing to do a very inhuman thing, which is to say, I obtain information and I believe it's completely true and I change overnight. Like, that is not usually how most people I have ever fucking met. That is not how I am as a person.
So this is more accurate than that.
Yes. Which I will say, honestly, as we've gone on through this, I will say it is more accurate, but I don't know necessarily if it makes it more fun, because it's sort of...
I was going to say, it doesn't...
Like, what makes a good story? What makes good entertainment? There's a huge discourse to have on that kind of thing, because all that is subjective and relative.
It can be very accurate, and it can be very realistic, but that doesn't mean it's interesting or fun for a player.
Yes. Asra, Julian, they wanted to help you.
They wanted to give everyone hand sanitizer.
Nadia'a,
and masks.
And masks, damn it. Nadia'a looks startled at their names. She looks at me as if truly seeing me for the first time.
Oh dear. How do you... Perhaps you truly have a magical gift. I'm sorry. I underestimated you earlier. You don't know who I am, but I know about you. No, I don't believe that. Shit, you do kind of know about me.
Yeah.
Asra and Julian. They kept me company. That last year. They did help me. We worked together on many things.
Oh.
But not everything. I was afraid to let them in too much. I was afraid to rely on them. And yet, Julian was one of your lead doctors trying to solve the plague, which you didn't seem to know based on the other route at all.
But also, again, okay, so
But Valdemar doesn't exist in this story, so maybe that dungeon doesn't exist in this story.
Maybe? Okay, so you're gonna have to forgive me. Like, one thing that keeps killing me is basically how fast people die of the plague. The whole entirety of Vesuvio would have been basically done in a matter of weeks.
If it's like 3 days to death. Yeah.
If it's that bad. I'm sorry. Now, actually being in a pandemic, I'm kind of like, you guys, Americans are really dumb about this, so this might be really assumptive, but still.
What if it's that deadly, but since it's a magical plague, it's not actually commuted like a regular plague, and so sort of in the way of like a sacrifice to pay a toll, it kills people at a certain rate.
Ooh.
Because it is magically about something.
I would like to actually know what that is then.
That would be fun. Or at least to have
Maybe
more
they'll
of an
cover
idea
that in Lucio's route. Who
of
knows?
just going, it killed people, not necessarily in droves, but consistently at this amount, kind of thing. Or, it would go in waves where it would let the population recover and then come back again.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. I don't know. Rely on them. I delegated a task here or there, but I never truly opened up. I'm afraid the three of us, we had many secrets between us. I wish I had reached out to them more. I wish I had not hidden away how my heart was breaking.
Around us the tower shivers, a great vibration running through the whole structure.
It just, that thing where you just get that sort of like muscle shiver running down your back. Woo!
Like, ooh, earthquake.
Oh, not again. I've had quite enough of falling and beetles, thank you. Keep it, I do not want it.
But before she could
Sniffles and recovers her crying. Oh my god. Puts her makeup back together. No, thank you.
But before she can say another word, the tower begins to truly shatter around us. I catch hold of Nadia's hand as we're thrown into the air.
Poof!
But my grip is slipping. I shout to be heard over the screaming wind. When you wake up, find my shop. I'll help you.
Oh, this was the dream then.
Oh, look! Somebody watched Howl's Moving Castle.
They did. Oh my god.
This is deeply Howl's Moving Castle.
The howling wind, Howl brayed, Sophie hollered, Howl screamed.
It actually, the thing was I thought was really interesting is it actually took me multiple times to understand that she was saying, find me in the future, kind of thing. I just did, because it was so strange. Like, I just couldn't get it. Like, my brain just couldn't.
That's a level of connection, though, understanding your own temporality, of going, you did find me in the future. So I'm going to tell past you to do that, assuming that you need to be told.
Right.
Or assuming that is a thing that could help you, going, oh my god, I want to stay connected to you.
Right.
And that's it's interesting. Like, I don't know if I would come up with that.
Yeah, I don't think so.
But it was really, but on the other hand, Sophie's smart as a whip in a lot of ways, so there you are.
Which is a thing they missed out on, like, a lot. Like, and she was a witch in her own right, actually, in the book. And I'm just still disappointed that they cut that.
Yeah.
Because then they suddenly are just like, oh, Howl is the most magical, McSparkly magic boy. And you're kind of like,
now,
oh my god.
I feel like some of it was basically implied the way they do with Japanese culture. And if you haven't seen Howl's Moving Castle, forgive, this will not mean anything to you. Or if you haven't read the book. I'll say, but in it, they definitely made her be able to do magical things, but they were more subtle about it in the way that it is the listener's job to understand the text of a subject.
Yes.
And so I feel like that's more what happened there.
It's very possible.
Anyway.
Find my shop. I'll help you. And then we're torn apart, and I'm falling again. Sounds exactly like the movie. Just like very casually, and it doesn't mean that it is, and that's not all that media critique has to boil down to, but that's what it says.
But sometimes it's just like, is that a reference? I think it's a reference.
I wash up on the shore of the High Priestess's realm, carried by the starry sea.
Twinkly, twinkly.
My guide from earlier sits in the surf, tongue lolling out as they lap at the sea foam.
Ew! I keep getting torn between their illustration looks very, very person. Very, like, structured clothes that you'd have to put on thoughtfully, a backpack that you'd have to use complexly, and walking on two legs, and I'm going to bound around and lap at seawater. Sounds very, very dog. And so I'm like, I don't know if they're trying to, also it sounds like you would soak your clothing to get down and lap at the seawater.
I know!
Your beautiful, beautiful clothing, it's so pretty.
You'll have to forgive me. It doesn't mean that the water is bad at all, but my brain is just like, I have been to both California, and I have both been to Pennsylvania, and I have also been to some other place.
Salt water.
Don't do it. Even like lake water, if it starts to you just go, no, that's algae.
It tastes terrible.
Oh. As I come back to myself, they hop up, excited to see me. Wearily I get to my feet, brushing sand off my clothes, and begin walking up the steps to the temple.
I spent a lot of time laying on the floor in ash. I'm going to stand up and be clean for this.
Damn it. The dog follows close behind, pale eyes always on me.
I don't know if I would call them the dog in my own mind. I appreciate that the MC does, but based on the fact that that's not just a dog. Anyway.
There is a figure waiting for me at the top of the stairs.
Based on the fact that they're a dog, if the figure is the high priestess, there's an owl waiting for me at the top of the stairs.
Oh my god! All right,
there's a goat at the end of the banquet table. I'm suddenly just like all the Arcana. You're just like, there's a fox in the sand.
I mean, the thing is that I understand. So it is meant to be a convention in order to convey some amount of mystery, but I feel like it's so. It gets so difficult, again, with doing a first-person perspective. And the thing is you could do, first-person limited or various different kinds. It's not like there's only one way of doing it, right? It's like in Harry Potter, you'll have to forgive me for referencing it, but it's the first thing that came to mind, where they have third-person more or less kind of limited, largely just around Harry, which is why some people make the case that the stories are largely from his perspective. Therefore, all of the opinions listed in there are really just his
perceptions.
Yeah. And I don't know what I think about that, but I'm like, I just get so frustrated with this because I can't tell, everybody go, you can make what you want. And I'm like, but it's not. If we're supposed to take it as this is largely first-person perspective limited, really quite very much to the singular person, then this is already a whole character. How do you make decisions that way? You know,
I'm just like, if we call that a dog, we should call everything else a straight animal.
Dog, owl, that's a goat. I'm actually shocked that we don't do that too. I'm totally understand. Anyway, so we are actually out of time. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us for this very talky episode. We have a lot of fun doing these. Please feel free to interact with the video, comment, subscribe. Please also feel free to go check out our Ko-Fi, Patreon, and our Twitch. We have some links in the description down below. We'd love to see you at any of those locations. Yeah. And I have been Scandal.
And I have been Lies.
And it was great playing with you!